Okay, dear friends, it is really an honor to join you at the 10th edition of the Palestine Digital Activism Forum. And I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to Hamla, the Arab Center for the Advancement of Social Media, for convening this very important conference, workshop, conversation. At a time when digital spaces are increasingly contested, your work defending Palestinian digital rights and advances and safeguards are truth, dignity, and freedom of expression, which, as you all know, has been under assault. And this event, therefore, is incredibly timely, as it encapsulates a considerable challenge facing us as we speak. The Palestinian struggle is not one confined to a battle only over territory, I mean land, or only over rights and political recognition. It is also a struggle over narrative, over who is seen, who is heard, who is believed, and whose memory is allowed to endure. In this context, my friends, I have been witnessing, and I have been a witness to a critical truth in my time here as a Palestinian ambassador to the UK, and being part of the work of our embassy over the past years. And diplomacy needs to evolve. In the Palestinian context, it is evolving. Diplomacy can no longer be confined solely to official meetings, former correspondence, and statements issued through traditional channels. Today, diplomacy must also operate in the digital spheres. I really mean here, we are not just a traditional sort of diplomats, but we are also advocates, because we represent a cause and a people that are struggling for the cause and rights for a century. Nonetheless, this needs to be defined. It must engage, and we must engage in the spaces where public understanding is shaped, where misrepresentation can be rife, and where erasure is too often normalized. This is the sphere we operate in: erasure, genocide, mass murder, mass destruction of our people and of our homeland. This is why I wish to speak today about the role of diplomacy in fighting against erasure. And for Palestine, diplomacy is not merely the management of our relations with our friends and allies. It is also the defense of our people's presence, our people's narrative, and our people's right to speak in their own voice. In an angle in which digital platforms increasingly influence political discourse, public sentiment, and even policy environments. The protection and projection of narrative has become an essential part of diplomatic work. And if you go back to the last 2.5 years, since the beginning of the genocide, you will notice that it all started with the narrative. If you get the narrative right, you got everything else right. You got the millions of people in the streets, you got the big transformation, huge, massive transformation in the public opinion that in itself translates itself into local government, into central government, into parliament, into political parties, and ultimately into the decision-making process. So narrative is absolutely paramount in the conversation today. And this is our experience. Everything that followed in the last few months here in Britain started with getting the narrative right and engaging as effective as we can be with the masses and with the public opinion. So here in the UK, in Britain, this has required us to carefully consider how we communicate, with whom, and to what end. So the Palestinian embassy, as an example, to the UK, of course, has sought to use a range of digital tools and media to advance this effort. From our official website and public statements, to digital briefings, and materials spread around, parliamentary briefings, online public engagements, tailored video messages, and we do a lot of these tailored video messages, and of course virtual convenings and briefings. And during the corona, this has become a key sort of digital tool, the virtual conversations, briefings, talks, meetings even. I have personally found social media, including Instagram and X, particularly useful for our digital outreach here. These platforms have allowed us to communicate not only with policymakers and institutional stakeholders, but with the wider public as well, which is very, very crucial. This is important because diplomacy today must be both institutional and public facing. When we, for instance, participate in online meetings with civil society organizations, with students, with faith groups, trade unions, academics, members of our community, the Palestinian community in Britain, we are effectively building relationships. We are creating spaces for dialogue, clarifications, and solidarity. We are building a movement. That's what we're doing. I mean, digital diplomacy is digital resistance. It is, in the very end, building a movement. We are ensuring that diplomacy remains connected to people rather than limited to official channels. Important they are, but it has to be connected to the base, which is the people. Likewise, parliamentary briefings have become an important tool for me to focus the attention of key policymakers in moments of political significance, like the moment we are living now and for the last so many years. So recently, for instance, I spoke alongside my fellow Arab ambassadors about the need in the parliament, about the need to avoid and to make sure that Palestine is not forgotten or pushed aside when there is such a regional war, of course, started by Israel and the US. Such opportunities serve not only to inform members of parliament and public officials, but also to shape the terms of wider debate. So we have to always create the narrative, make sure that the narrative is spread, and make sure that the story is told. Strategic communications, if you may. And this is relentless. This is nonstop. This is every day, every morning, every evening. In this sense, digital communication has been an important means of ensuring that the Palestinian perspective is present, accessible, and grounded in our story, but also grounded in law, in history, and lived reality. I mean, we have to share all that, but focusing on lived reality. And this leads to a second point. Effective communication, we found out, which is critical and requires more than just a presence online platforms. I mean, you have to be effective in your communication. This is not just about online, by the way. It requires thoughtfulness in the development of our messaging. It requires understanding the audiences, not as passive recipients of information. That would be a big mistake, but as communities with distinct experiences, expectations, and modes of engagement. Here in the UK, we have such a diverse communities. I mean, it cannot be more diverse, I have to say. So tailoring, targeting your message has to be really done in a very particular, strategic, professional way. And this includes also our own community. I mean, this is not just about the composition of the British communities, the British people, but also includes the Palestinian audiences in the United Kingdom, and this has a particular significance. So this diverse audience, it includes young Palestinians born and raised in Britain. Students, professionals, families, long-established community figures, dignitaries, individuals whose connection to Palestine is political, cultural, emotional, and deeply personal. So you're not just talking to the friends of Palestine, you're talking to your own people. And you cannot subdivide the message. It has to carry the same central message. And accordingly, my friends, our message must be developed in ways that are responsive to this diversity. Responsive to this diversity. It must be clear, principled, and credible. It must speak across generations. And by the way, this is very important to speak across generations. I often check my social media platforms, for instance, to see the generational balance, the gender balance, the geographic balance. And the more I see diversity, the more I know we are on our way. This is very effective. This is very impactful. If I see that most of those who watch us or follow us are from a certain background or a certain age group or a certain gender or a certain geographic location, that raises the red line for me, light for me. That's not really the most effective way to communicate with a wider audience. It must balance factual rigor with human experience. And this is very important, to balance factual rigor with human experience, because the biggest existential threat and the biggest work that has done against us was the dehumanization process that the mainstream media took part in the last 80 years or maybe a century. And it must create points of connection, to be relevant, to relate to our audiences. That my story is your story. This is not just about being, this is about what we experience. What we experience is also shared with many other communities. It must create points of connection and that are not abstract. I mean, this talk of abstract is absolutely ineffective. No abstraction here. This is not just about, centimeters of lands here. This is not about negotiation. And our message, my friends, must be immediate and meaningful. Every message has to be immediate. I mean, this is not just about something down the line or something that happened 100 years ago. So some audiences respond most strongly to concise digital stories, of course, visual storytelling and short form messages, and particularly the youth here. I go back to the diversity that can be shared widely and quickly, and we do a lot of that, and it's very effective. But others engage more deeply. So you have to provide for all that. Others are not interested with the scrolling and the 30 seconds videos. No, others engage more deeply through speeches, conversations, discussions, dialogue, long form discussions, interviews, webinars, public forums, what have you. And we have tens of that, if not hundreds of that on an annual basis. Some require political framing, while others seek personal testimony. You see the variety of the audience. Some needs legal context or historical explanation. All that needs to be included in every message you make and you do. The challenge, therefore, is not to ensure that our message inform, or the challenge is actually, to ensure that our message inform, resonate, and mobilize. This is the challenge. Our messages, all of our messages, must inform, must resonate, and must mobilize, because we're doing this for a purpose. I mean, this is a major strategy to use the informing and the resonating of your message with all these communities to mobilize the communities. And you have to measure your success. So are you able to send off hundreds of thousands of people to the streets? Were you part of that? Was your message part of that? Otherwise, you are just an influencer. And we in the diplomatic corps, I and our team here, are not in the business of being influencers. We are in the business of political achievements, tangible achievements. And this is especially important when we consider impact and measure impact. Too often, for instance, diplomatic impact is measured only from the top down. Government meetings, government decisions, official statements, parliamentary outcomes, or institutional recognition. Those are, of course, important, and we have done some of that, as you have followed, particularly in the last few months. The UK, which has issued the Balfour Declaration with all of its historic engagement with us, the colonial era has recognized the state of Palestine. That's part of measuring the impact and tailoring the message to the informing of the people, all the way to the mobilizing the people towards a very well-defined set of goals. Of course, recognition is one of the goals, and it's just a step in a very long journey of changing the way this country has been dealing with us, from the Balfour Declaration and the negation of our people and the negation of our rights, all the way to today, recognizing our right to self-determination and statehood. But nonetheless, these are, of course, important. The institutional recognition, the official statements, the government policy is very important. This is the end game in the end. But there is another dimension that is equally vital, and that is the bottom-up dimension. The bottom-up dimension. And you cannot separate between both. You need a bottom-up dimension, a bottom-up strategy. Because without the base, without the pressure from the base, without that bottom-up strategy, you will not get what you want from the top-down approach. Lasting change, my friends, in public discourse rarely begins only at the level of institutions. And remember, all the people who have gone through experiences like ours, struggle, oppression, negation, erasure, including the South Africans, it often begins among communities, among students, among local organizers, among those who challenge dominant assumptions in everyday conversations and civic spaces. The real agents of change is that. It's not government. The agents of change that impose their will on their government are the communities, are at that level, at the very level of the street level. But you have to be able to translate that into decision making. Otherwise, you're just an activist. For this reason, our approach must include deliberate engagement with the wider public. This is where digital diplomacy and public diplomacy intersect. You cannot separate between public diplomacy and digital diplomacy. They are not separate endeavors. They are mutually reinforcing. Digital diplomacy provides the tools, reach, and immediacy. Digital diplomacy provides the tools, the platforms, the reach, and immediacy, because there's something immediate about Palestine. We cannot just, this is not just about writing a brilliant book. Every day, there is an immediate existential threat for us. There, digital diplomacy is such a tool whereby you immediately spread the word, and it does reach. It does reach. So public diplomacy provides the relationships. It provides the trust and the social grounding. You see, that is the digital diplomacy. This is the public diplomacy. You build relations with the communities, with the people you are serving with and for, wherever we are in any country. So together, the public diplomacy with the digital diplomacy, together they form a core component of how Palestinian representation must operate today, and does, at least in our experience. They allow us to reach beyond official circles and engage students, journalists, local leaders, community organizations, and younger generations who are increasingly shaping public debate. They are increasingly shaping public debate, and this certainly goes beyond the boundaries of Britain, and you are all following the public debate in the US, in Europe, elsewhere. Things are absolutely happening. They allow us to bring the Palestinian narrative into spaces where mainstream discourse has too often excluded, diluted, or even distorted. And I stand a witness to the distortion by the mainstream discourse, the mainstream media of the West. And this has been vital in the broader effort to challenge mainstream media narratives. We know that Palestinian perspectives have too often been marginalized, stripped out of context, or framed through narratives that reduce Palestinians to either abstraction or reaction. So we are either an abstract, just some numbers, unknown, no dreams, no neighbors, no friends, no hobbies, but also reaction. We are always reactionary. So history began on the 7th of October. That is the story that was to be exported to us on the 7th of October. History began there. So, and then we react. So the structural realities, and of course we challenge that. We challenge that. History did not begin on the 7th of October. It began here in this country, in this city, in London, 109 years ago. The Balfour Declaration, that colonial era and that settler colonialism that hit our people since then. So the structural realities of occupation, colonization, dispossession, violence, mass violence, erasure, genocide, and the denial of rights are too often obscured, while Palestinian voices are frequently treated as secondary to the framework imposed on us. You see, this is the dilemma here. It is a framework that is imposed on us, a game that we have to play, a box. We find ourselves in a box that we have to challenge. And by the way, this whole logic has been with us for so many decades and years that make you lose before you begin even. Before you begin, the moment they ask you a question that is the wrong question, you've lost the conversation. Because then you are the accused, you are the aggressor, you are the colonizer, you are the reactionary. And this is a game that has been used, a vicious one, by mainstream media against us for a long time. So just to fast forward and try to conclude here, digital engagement has helped create opportunities to challenge this imbalance. It has allowed Palestinian institutions, journalists, researchers, and communities to communicate directly with audiences. I mean, what happened in Gaza in the last 2.5 years is a classic example of how much social media has enabled our people in Gaza, our youth, or even children, our parents, everybody, to become correspondents, to become reporters. In the absence of the mainstream media, in the absence of media altogether, in the absence of international media because of Israel's ban, because Israel wanted to commit the genocide in darkness. But can you imagine if our people did not have the tools to convey the message? The genocide would have been committed in darkness. But the genocide was not committed in darkness. The genocide was committed in real time, thanks to our people and their bravery, their heroism, and their ability to document their own execution. This is the first time the people who are genocided are documenting the genocide in real time, so the world was watching. And I salute all these people, all the activists on the social media, Bisan and many others, without going through the list, who have been able to convey the message. But the key change that enabled them to do so was the presence of, or the availability of, new modes of conveying the message, which is the social media, to provide. And they were able, all of us were able to provide context in real time, to correct misinformation, and to assert Palestinian voices where they might otherwise be absent. It has enabled us to challenge framing that begins the story too late. And it's always, our story begins too late. It's when Israelis are affected, like the 7th of October. But when Palestinians are killed in huge numbers, arrested, rounded, their land confiscated, appropriated, their houses and homes demolished, etc., etc., the story is not the prime sort of headline. And so where does the story begin for international media? It begins not when Palestinians are victims, but when Israelis. So this, and it omits historical responsibility. Always there is an omission of historical responsibility. There is an omission of the long trajectory. There is an omission of the context. Or it renders Palestinian suffering visible only when it conforms to accepted narratives here in the West. So our suffering becomes visible only when it is acceptable to their narrative. In this sense, digital space has become a vital arena of diplomatic work. Not because it replaces traditional diplomacy, it doesn't, but because it amplifies and deepens it. However, we must also be clear-eyed about the difficulties and the challenges. And I am aware, and I know that digital platforms are not neutral spaces. And I have gone into a lot of engagements with social media platforms, particularly at the beginning of the situation. And remember, during the Sheikh Jarrah events in 2021, there was clear anti-Palestinian bias designed by these digital platforms.
دكتور حسام،
Yeah, I'm
يعني